2013 Lakers. This team looked like a dream on paper, but turned into one giant basketball experiment gone totally sideways. They rolled into the season with 5 All-Stars, a $100 million payroll, and sky-high talk of breaking records. Instead, they tripped out of the gate, firing their coach after 5 games and replacing him with a system the team barely fit into. The offense was supposed to be fast and explosive, but barely made it past average. Turnovers piled up, chemistry lagged, and the team's defense was one of the league's worst. Dwight Howard was still rehabbing, Nash broke his leg in Game 2, and Powell spent over 30 games on the bench. Meanwhile, Kobe played almost 40 minutes a night until his Achilles snapped in April. They ended up using 24 starting lineups. Even with a late surge, they barely scraped into the playoffs, only to get swept without Kobe. All that talent, all that money, and it still led to a first-round exit. Dwight left right after. The craziest part, this chaos kicked off a 6-year playoff drought, the longest ever for the Lakers. For all their flash, they became a textbook case of how not to build a super team. 2018 Cavaliers. This team felt like a never-ending science project, with LeBron James carrying a revolving door of teammates. They used 22 different players, cycled through lineups like outfit changes, and still made it all the way to the finals. Mid-season, they completely flipped the roster. 6 players gone, 4 fresh faces in. Guys like Isaiah Thomas, D. Wade, and Derrick Rose were out, while Jordan Clarkson and Larry Nance suddenly had rings in their dreams. The front office tried to fix chemistry with trades, but defense was still a mess. They gave up nearly 110 points a game. On top of that, Tyronn Lue had to step away mid-season with health issues, leaving Larry Drew to hold the clipboard. Through it all, LeBron averaged 34 points in the playoffs and played nearly 42 minutes a night. He led the team in every major category, like it was a solo tour. They survived 7 games against Indiana, swept Toronto, and beat Boston without Kevin Love in Game 7. Then the Warriors crushed them in 4 straight. No surprise. But the fact they got there at all might be the wildest part. Total chaos. Maximum LeBron. 1999 Bulls. This team didn't just fall off. They plummeted like a piano off a balcony. One season after winning their 6th title, they turned into a full-on rebuild disaster. Michael Jordan retired, Scottie Pippen got traded, Dennis Rodman wasn't re-signed, and Phil Jackson was out. The replacements? A rookie head coach with 0 NBA experience and a roster full of guys who looked like they won a fan contest. Tony Kukoc became the lead scorer, but the team still finished with just 13 wins, the worst in franchise history at the time. The defense was shaky, but the offense was a full-on dumpster fire, dead last in the league with just under 82 points per game. They also had the league's worst assist-to-turnover ratio. The lockout didn't help either, cutting the season to 50 games and squeezing 3 to 4 games into each week. The front office's genius plan of going young blew up instantly, and Tim Floyd's system looked more like recess than basketball. They used a slow pace, couldn't rebound, and had no all-stars for the first time in 15 years. It wasn't just a collapse, it was an unraveling of epic proportions, like watching a championship parade float explode in reverse. By the way, if you guys want to subscribe, I'm going to be posting every day, thanks. Anyways, 2020 Warriors. This squad went from kings of the league to basement dwellers. After 5 straight finals trips, they crashed to 15 wins, dead last in the West. The chaos started with injuries. Klay Thompson missed the whole season with a torn ACL, and Steph Curry broke his hand just 4 games in. Draymond Green limped through 43 games, and suddenly, the dynasty looked like an empty shell. Kevin Durant left for Brooklyn. Iggy got traded, and DeMarcus Cousins packed for Los Angeles. D'Angelo Russell came in, didn't fit, then got flipped mid-season for Andrew Wiggins and a pick. They also ditched Alec Burks and Glenn Robinson for whatever they could get. Eric Pascal turned out to be a bright spot in making the all-rookie team, while Jordan Poole looked shaky but showed promise. Offensively, they couldn't score, just over 106 points a game on under 44% shooting. Defense, even worse. They gave up 115 a night. To top it off, they opened a new arena with an empty roster. Then the pandemic hit, and they weren't even invited to the bubble. Total wipeout. Dynasty unplugged. 2012 Bobcats. If someone asked what it looks like when a basketball team melts, this would be the answer. They finished 7-59, the worst win percentage in NBA history. Not worst of the season, worst ever. They lost 23 straight to end the year, and that wasn't even their only massive losing streak. No all-stars, no elite talent, and somehow even less chemistry. Gerald Henderson led the team in scoring with just over 15 points a game, which sounds okay until you realize that nobody else did much of anything. Kemba Walker was a rookie, Corey Maggette was hanging on, and Boris Diaw didn't even finish the season. Offensively, they averaged only 87 points a night and ranked dead last in almost everything. Defense, also bottom of the barrel. Opponents scored over 100 regularly, and the Bobcats gave up second chance points like candy. Paul Silas couldn't fix it, and Michael Jordan got roasted for building this mess. Even the lockout couldn't save them. They still had to play 66 games. And after all that, they didn't even win the lottery. Historic failure, total collapse, and somehow still weirdly unforgettable. 2007 Cavaliers. This team made the finals with a 22-year-old LeBron James dragging a lineup that looked more like a fantasy draft gone wrong. They went 50-32 in the regular season, mostly thanks to a top 5 defense and LeBron doing everything short of driving the team bus. Offensively, they were middle of the road at best, putting up just under 97 points a night. The rest of the roster, Ilgauskas was solid, Larry Hughes got hurt, and Daniel Gibson went from rookie to starting in the finals. In the playoffs, they rolled the Wizards, beat the Nets, then somehow stormed back from down 2 games to beat Detroit. LeBron dropped 48 in Game 5 of that series, including the last 25 points. Unreal. But once they got to the finals, reality hit hard. The Spurs swept them. Game scores were brutal, and the offense sputtered with LeBron getting smothered. They scored under 85 points in 3 of the 4 games. Still, the run was weirdly impressive. 1 star, 0 all-star help, and a trip to the finals. It wasn't pretty, but it's one of the strangest playoff runs ever pulled off. 2015 Suns. This team started fast, looked fun, then blew itself up mid-season, like someone hit a big red self-destruct button. They were 26-15 at one point, playing a high-speed offense with Eric Bledsoe, Dragic, and Isaiah Thomas, all putting up numbers. But trying to squeeze 3 ball-dominant point guards into one lineup turned into chaos. Minutes were messy, roles clashed, and Dragic went public, saying he didn't trust the front office. That's always a great sign. At the trade deadline, the Suns dumped both Dragic and Thomas, then brought in Brandon Knight, who didn't really fit. From there, they spiraled, going 13-28 to finish under 500. The offense tanked, defense got worse, and their chemistry totally evaporated. Jeff Hornacek tried to hold it together, but the whole thing unraveled. Markieff Morris sulked after his twin got traded, and the locker room just cracked. They couldn't beat elite teams and ended up missing the playoffs by a mile. Somehow, though, this weird mess still ended with them drafting Devin Booker. So while the season fell apart, it weirdly set up their future. 1 part meltdown, 1 part accident of genius. 2022 Nets. This team was a glitch in the simulation, stacked on paper, scrambled in practice. They started the year with a big 3, but by season's end, it was more like a rotating cast of question marks. James Harden got traded mid-season after checking out mentally, and Ben Simmons came in but never touched the floor. Kevin Durant missed 21 games with a knee sprain, and Kyrie was part-time thanks to the New York vaccine mandate. With all that, they still finished 44-38 and had to claw through the play-in just to make the playoff. They beat Cleveland to get in, then immediately got swept by Boston. Not just beaten, swept, 4 games. Gone. Durant and Kyrie had flashes, but nothing clicked. They lost 11 straight during the season, got bounced in the first round, and somehow still looked like a team people feared. They averaged just under 113 points per game, but defense gave up nearly the same. The whole year was a mess of what-ifs and could-have been. High talent, no consistency, and one of the weirdest flameouts for a team with championship dreams. Absolute beautiful disaster. And you can make this your best season yet with nutritious, 2-minute meals from Factor. Personally, I've been using Factor for the past few weeks, and honestly, it's changed everything. No more stressing over what to cook or cleaning up after. Just heat, eat, and go. Especially while watching the playoffs, it makes everything so easy. The shredded chicken taco bowl, fire. The garlic herb salmon, better than anything I've ever made at home. Instead of being stuck in the kitchen, I've been spending more time outside and hitting the gym. And Factor fits right into that routine. And like I said, with the playoffs on too, you don't gotta stress about missing the game. With 45 weekly options, I can switch it up constantly. Whether I'm aiming for high protein or just keeping it light, they've got it all. Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, Keto, even veggie meals. Plus, they've got snacks and desserts that don't ruin your goals. I've been loving their smoothies and those peanut butter energy bites. I'm hooked. So why not savor more this summer? Let Factor take care of the meals so you can enjoy more of everything else. Get started at factormeals.com/modernjam50off and use code modernjam50off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. That's code modernjam50off at factormeals.com/modernjam50off for 50% off plus free shipping. Thank you, Fact. 2010 Wizards. This team started with playoff dreams and ended up as a walking cautionary tale. They brought back Gilbert Arenas, paired him with Anton Jamison and Karen Butler, and added vets like Mike Miller and Randy Foye. It looked solid on paper. Then Arenas brought guns into the locker room over a gambling dispute with Javaris Crittenton, and the season took a nosedive straight into chaos. Arenas got suspended, Crittenton too, and suddenly the so-called Big Three was down to 0. They ended up trading Butler, Jamison, and Brendan Haywood mid-season, effectively setting the whole thing on fire. Josh Howard came in and tore his ACL 4 games later. They shuffled through 23 players and 22 different starting lineups. The defense was a mess. The offense never found rhythm, and by the end, the team had no identity at all. They finished 26-56, ranked near the bottom in almost every category, and won 0 games against the East's top 4 teams. The only upside? They won the draft lottery and took John Wall. Everything else? One giant franchise reset wrapped in scandal, trades, and one of the NBA's weirdest implosions. 23 Heat. This team crawled into the playoffs as the 8th seed, lost their first play-in game, and then flipped the script on the entire league. After barely sneaking past Chicago to clinch the final playoff spot, they stunned the top-seeded Bucks in 5 games. Jimmy Butler went berserk, dropping 56 points in Game 4, one of the wildest performances in playoff history. Then they beat the Knicks in 6, rolled into the Eastern Finals, and somehow went up 3-0 on Boston. Things got dicey when they lost the next 3, but they answered with a Game 7 blowout in Boston's own building. Unreal. Their regular season was forgettable, 44-38, dead last in scoring. But their defense carried them, ranked 2nd in points allowed. Butler led the playoff charge, averaging nearly 27 points a game, while undrafted guys like Gabe Vincent and Caleb Martin turned into key contributors. Even Kevin Love popped in as a mid-season pickup. They eventually lost to the Nuggets in the finals, but that didn't erase the madness of the run. From barely playoff worthy to the last team standing in the East, this Heat team made weird look heroic. 2003 Blazers. This team won 50 games and still managed to be a disaster. They had talent everywhere. Rasheed Wallace, Bonzi Wells, and even a veteran Scottie Pippen limping around, but it all got buried under a pile of suspensions, arrests, and technical fouls. Wallace led the league with 41 techs, a record that felt more like a personal hobby. Off the court, things were worse. Stoudemire and Randolph had drug issues, Ruben Patterson had a felony conviction, and Kentil Woods got in trouble for dogfighting. It was a lineup of chaos. Despite all that, they made the playoffs, then blew a 3-0 lead to Dallas, one of the few times that's ever happened. Their offense was top 10. Defense was mid-tier, but the locker room was a circus. Wallace threatened a referee. Wells spit at players. Fans started checking arrest reports before box scores. Head coach Morris Cheeks had no control, and GM Bob Whitsitt just kept adding gasoline. They were somehow good and embarrassing at the same time. The Jail Blazers nickname stuck for a reason. This wasn't just a basketball team, it was a tabloid, a 50-win fever dream of dysfunction. 2005 Lakers. This was the season the Empire collapsed into a pile of purple and gold confusion. Shaq was gone, traded to Miami for Lamar Odom, Karen Butler, and Brian Grant. Solid players, but not Shaq. Phil Jackson dipped too, leaving Rudy Tomjanovich to steer the ship. He didn't last, resigning halfway through due to health concerns, and Frank Hamblin took over. That went about as well as you'd expect from a backup coach trying to patch up a broken dynasty. Kobe Bryant had the stage to himself for the first time and averaged over 27 points, but the team fell apart behind him. They went 34-48, missed the playoffs, and finished dead last in defense. Lamar Odom showed flashes, Butler had moments, and Chucky Atkins started all 82 games, which tells you how strange things got. They finished 4th in their division and 11th in the West. No direction, no chemistry, and no structure. The whole season felt like a hangover from the three-peat era. A year after the finals, they were irrelevant. One All-NBA nod for Kobe, and a whole lot of growing pains for everyone else. 1997 Spurs. They crashed harder than a shopping cart in a parking lot downhill. One season after finishing with 59 wins, they spiraled all the way to 20. And it wasn't because they suddenly forgot how basketball works. It was injuries. Everywhere. David Robinson played 6 games. Sean Elliott missed over half the season. Chuck Person's back gave up. Charles Smith barely showed up. The starting lineup may as well have been picked out of a raffle. They used 22 different ones. Dominique Wilkins led the team at 37 years old, which should already tell you how strange things got. He gave them 18 points a night, but the team's offense was one of the worst in the league. Defense? Forget it. Without Robinson, opponents waltzed through the paint like it was an open house. Then they fired Bob Hill after a 3-15 start and handed the keys to Greg Popovich, who hadn't coached an NBA game before. They finished dead last in the West. but somehow that mess gave them the number 1 pick. And boom, Tim Duncan. So yeah, they were bizarre, broken, and bad, but it accidentally launched one of the greatest dynasties ever, 2017 Bulls. The roster looked like someone shuffled a deck of famous names and hoped for chemistry. They ended up with a dead-even record, 41-41, sneaking into the 8th seed like a guest who wasn't really invited. Fred Hoiberg was the one stuck trying to make it work, coaching a team led by Jimmy Butler, who actually had a strong year with nearly 24 points, 6 boards, and over 5 assists a game. But around him, chaos in the form of Rajon Rondo and D. Wade. Rondo posted solid numbers, but his fit with the rest of the team felt more like a group project gone wrong. Wade still had flashes, putting up 18 points per game, but he was clearly not in Miami anymore. Offensively, they were all over the place, ranking in the bottom third of the league in scoring and efficiency. The defense wasn't bad though, finishing 6th in defensive rating. They somehow stole the first 2 games against Boston in the playoffs, then completely folded. 4 straight losses later, they were done. After that, the team blew it all up. Butler traded, Wade gone, rebuild mode fully engaged. 2008 Heat. This team went from holding the trophy to holding the league's worst record. They won just 15 games. That's not a typo. D. Wade only played 51 games, and even when he was out there, he wasn't himself. Bad knees and shoulders will do that. Shaq looked 35 and broken, gave them 33 games, then got shipped to Phoenix for Sean Marion, who showed up, rebounded a ton, and still couldn't fix anything. Pat Riley took a mid-season break for surgeries, and the interim coach didn't win a single game. Alonzo Mourning's season ended after 25 games. Haslam missed 33, and Jason Williams limped through 67. The rest of the team, old vets, rookies, and whatever was left in the bargain bin. Their defense was basically theoretical, and the offense was the worst in the league. They finished dead last in net rating, had a 15-game losing streak, and went winless against winning teams. It was like watching a former champion slowly unravel on live television. But somehow, that mess paved the way for LeBron James, Chris Bosh, and a 4-year run to the finals. Total chaos, historic weirdness. 2007 Warriors. This team ran like they were double parked. They barely slipped into the playoffs with 42 wins, but once they got in, all logic flew out the window. They played the fastest pace in the league, had the second best offense, and somehow the worst defense. It was all gas, no brakes. Davis led the way, putting up 20 points and 8 assists, while casually stealing the ball over 2 times per game. Monte Ellis broke out and grabbed most improved, and Steven Jackson arrived mid-season like a walking heat check. That trade with Indiana also brought in Al Harrington, and suddenly, this team caught fire. They finished the season on a 16-5 run, just in time to blow the roof off the playoffs. The roster wasn't stacked, but the chemistry was real. They were fun, chaotic, unpredictable, and loud. Jason Richardson gave them scoring. Andris Biedrins cleaned up inside, and the bench ran like caffeinated squirrels. This wasn't a typical 8th seed. They were the first to take down a number 1 in a 7-game series. It didn't last past the second round, but the We Believe era earned its spot in NBA history. 2001 Wizards. They were a masterclass in how not to rebuild a team. Michael Jordan stepped in as president of basketball operations, fired the GM, hired a college coach with 0 NBA experience, and then practiced with the team while dropping hints about a comeback. The roster, a Frankenstein's monster of washed-up vets, confused rookies, and unlucky holdovers. Juwan Howard was gone mid-season. Mitch Richmond played 37 games and shot like someone wearing oven mitts. Rod Strickland was waived before Christmas after clashing with the coach, leaving Chris Whitney and Courtney Alexander to hold the backcourt, together with duct tape. Richard Hamilton had to carry the scoring at just 22 years old. They ended up using 24 different players and somehow managed a worse offense than anyone in the league. Their defense wasn't much better, giving up over 96 points per game with no rim protection, slow guards, and 0 chemistry. They lost 63 games, tied the Bulls for the worst record in the league, and got booed in their own building. That mess got them the number 1 pick, which they used on Kwame Brown. And somehow, it still got weirder after that. 2006 Knicks. They spent like a billionaire with a broken calculator and played like a team trying to lose on purpose. Their payroll hit $124 million, and they still finished dead, last in the East, with just 23 wins. Larry Brown was the head coach, but it felt more like he was conducting a year-long stress experiment. Isaiah Thomas built the roster and clearly thought collecting guards and confusion was a strategy. Stephon Marbury led the team in assists and chaos. Jamal Crawford led in scoring, and no one led in defense. They allowed over 105 points per game, second worst in the league, and their point differential was the worst. Eddie Curry showed flashes, but never rebounded like a center should. Channing Frye made the all-rookie team, and David Lee hustled off the bench, but the roster was a jigsaw puzzle made from 3 different boxes. Steve Francis and Jalen Rose showed up mid-season, and neither helped. Nate Robinson won the dunk contest, which was somehow the highlight of the year. The chemistry was non-existent, and the expectations were delusional. By season's end, Brown was out, and the Knicks were a luxury tax punchline. 2010 Nets. They didn't just lose games, they rewrote the manual on how to fall apart. This team went 12-70, just barely avoiding the worst record in NBA history. They started the season 0-18, cycled through 3 coaches, and played in an arena with more echoes than fans. Lawrence Frank got canned after going winless, and GM Kiki Vandeweghe stepped in as interim coach because why not make things weirder? Devin Harris missed time with injuries. Courtney Lee never broke out, and Janlian looked allergic to consistency. Brook Lopez put up numbers but couldn't carry this sinking ship. Their offense ranked dead last, their defense was almost as bad, and their net rating was an ugly minus 11.6. The locker room felt like a support group, and even fans gave up. Attendance plummeted. They lost 30, one of 41 home games. Ownership was in flux. The team was getting sold, and the move to Brooklyn was on the horizon, but they looked less like a rebuilding squad and more like a placeholder. They missed out on the top pick and drafted Derek Favors. The only thing more forgettable than the season was the roster. 1996 Grizzlies. Expansion team? More like an expansion disaster. Vancouver entered the league and immediately reminded everyone how brutal life can be for a brand new franchise. They somehow won their first 2 games and then dropped 19 in a row, like they were allergic to victory. And that was just the warm-up. They later lost 23 straight in one season. This team had veterans like Byron Scott and Blue Edwards, but it didn't help much. Greg Anthony ran the point, putting up solid numbers, and Bryant Reeves was the big rookie hope, averaging 13 points and 7 boards. He even made the all-rookie second team, but no amount of optimism could save a squad that finished 15-67. Their offense ranked dead last. Their defense gave up nearly 100 points a game. The roster was a jumbled collection of cast-offs, rookies, and guys pretending not to regret signing in Canada. Coach Brian Winters couldn't work miracles, and General Motors Place was mostly filled with curious fans hoping for anything resembling progress. Instead, they got a season-long lesson in how expansion pain works. It was rough, weird, and very, very Canadian. 1999 Knicks. They crawled into the playoffs as an 8th seed and somehow ended up in the NBA Finals. The season was already weird thanks to the lockout, which crammed 50 games into a chaotic sprint. New York barely made the cut with the 27-23 record, and nothing about them screamed contender. Patrick Ewing was banged up and aging. Allen Houston led the team in scoring, but was inconsistent. They traded fan favorite John Starks for Latrell Sprewell, a guy best known for choking his coach. Chemistry? Not really. They shuffled lineups, battled injuries, and couldn't score. Their offense ranked near the bottom of the league, but that defense, it dragged them forward. They upset Miami on a game winner by Houston, then steamrolled Atlanta and took down Indiana in 6 games. Sprewell turned into a playoff hero, and Van Gundy clung to ankles, literally and figuratively, to keep this thing moving. The Spurs crushed them in the finals, but nobody expected the Knicks to get that far. No all-star, no flashy stats, just grit, chaos, and one of the strangest, most unpredictable runs to the finals the league's ever seen. 2011 Pistons. This team was stuck in basketball purgatory. Too old to rebuild, too bad to matter. They finished 30-52, missing the playoffs and barely making headlines, unless it was for drama. John Queister coached like he had a bus ticket out of town in his back pocket. The roster was a strange mix. You had aging stars like Tracy McGrady putting up 8 points a game, and Ben Wallace still swatting shots at age 36. Then there were guys like Charlie Villanueva and Ben Gordon, paid to score, but offering little else. Rodney Stuckey led them in scoring at 15 points per game, which should tell you how bleak the offense was. Greg Monroe had a solid rookie year, and at least looked like he belonged. Tyshawn Prince quietly dropped 14 a night. While wondering how he ended up on this version of the Pistons, injuries piled up, rotations changed weekly, and reports of locker room mutiny didn't help. They had no identity, no consistent defense, and a roster full of maybe guys. It was a forgettable mess that only stood out because of how awkward and directionless it all felt. 2020 Rockets. They didn't just go small, they basically erased the concept of bigs altogether. After trading away Clint Capella, the Rockets ran with a lineup where 6'7" counted as tall. That's not just weird, it's historically weird. No traditional center, No real rim protection, just pure chaos, powered by James Harden's monster usage and Russell Westbrook's drives. They bombed threes like it was a dare, chucking over 45 per game, leading the league. But that came with a cost. Their rebounding took a dive, and teams lived in the paint against them. PJ Tucker played center at 6'5", bless his spine. Offensively, they were near the top in points. But their defense struggled, giving up more than 114 per game. The gamble paid off in flashes, especially during the bubble, where they reached the second round. But when they hit the Lakers, size finally mattered. The whole experiment was analytics gone wild, with Morey pulling the strings and D'Antoni pushing pace. By the end, everyone left. Harden, D'Antoni, Morey. That season wasn't just unconventional. It was a swan song to a very specific brand of basketball madness, and I still can't believe they tried it. 2005 Timberwolves. After making the Western Conference Finals the year before, they nosedived straight into mediocrity. They finished 44-38 and somehow still missed the playoffs. Flip Saunders started the season coaching, but got the boot at 25-26. Kevin McHale took over and went 19-12, but it wasn't enough. Kevin Garnett played every single game and still dragged this team as far as his 14-foot wingspan could reach. He put up 22 points, grabbed 13.5 boards, and threw in nearly 6 assists. Wally Zerbiak chipped in 15, while Sam Cassell and Latrell Sprewell basically ghosted the season. Cassell only played 59 games, and Sprewell barely hit 13 points per game. Eddie Griffin was a rare bright spot, giving them blocks and rebounds off the bench. Their offense was average, their defense was just good enough, but the team couldn't string wins together. After the season, Sprewell bailed, Cassell got traded, and McHale gave up the coaching gig. Garnett made the All-Star game and earned All-NBA honors, but the rest of the team went straight into the NBA's forgotten pile. 1998 Nuggets. 11 wins. That's it. They tied for the third worst record in league history and somehow still managed to look worse than the numbers say. They started 0-18 and basically never recovered. LaFonso Ellis led the team with just over 14 points a game, the lowest scoring leader in franchise history. Their top rebounder didn't hit 8 per game. Mark Jackson showed up mid-season, passed a lot, and probably wondered what he'd done to deserve this. The roster was a revolving door of journeymen and rookies, with 24 total players and 29 different starting lineups. Defense was a rumor. Opponents dropped over 100 points in more than half their games. Bill Hanslick, in his only season as head coach, steered the ship directly into an iceberg. Their net rating, minus 12.2. They weren't just bad, they were historically bad. The Nuggets ranked bottom 3 in pretty much every meaningful stat. Their payroll was near the lowest. Their attendance was abysmal, and they even traded away their best scorer during the season. This wasn't rebuilding, it was full-blown demolition. And the worst part, no one on the roster made a real impact long-term. 2011 Cavaliers. This team set a record nobody wants. 26 straight losses. It was their first season after LeBron James packed up and went to Miami, and the whole thing went downhill immediately. They finished 1963, dead last in the East. Byron Scott was the new coach, but he inherited a roster that fell apart faster than a garage sale lawn chair. Anton Jameson led the team with 18 points a game, but only played 56 times. J.J. Hickson grabbed nearly 9 boards a night, but it wasn't enough. Anderson Varejao was hurt most of the season, and Mo Williams got traded for Davis, who barely showed up. Their point differential, minus 8.8. They had a month, January, where they lost all 16 games. Their lowest moment, scoring just 57 points in a game and losing by 55. This wasn't just a bad year, it was a total collapse. No defense, no offense, no rhythm. Daniel Gibson was in the three-point contest. That's about it for highlights. They cycled through players like it was speed dating and ended up with nothing but a lottery pick and a footnote in NBA misery. 1999 Hornets. This team went from Eastern Conference hopefuls to chaotic, middle-of-the-pack mystery. They finished 26-24, missing the playoffs by 1 game. In a 50-game lockout season, they started with Glenn Rice and ended with Eddie Jones. That's right, they traded their best scorer mid-season, then wondered why their offense fell apart. Rice only played 27 games anyway, nursing injuries while shooting below his usual efficiency. Anthony Mason was solid, but constantly clashed with Coach Dave Cowens. David Wesley led the team in points and assists, which is fine if your name isn't David Wesley. They had 18 starting lineups in 50 games. The defense was sturdy, holding teams under 80 10 times, but the offense couldn't keep up. Post-trade, the team went 10-10, floating like driftwood in the East. Eddie Jones came in with steals, not buckets. The locker room, a mess. Mason feuded with Cowens. Cowens resigned. Fans checked out. They ranked 13th in attendance after being near the top, even with a positive net rating and solid defense. The Hornets melted under pressure. They were a strange swirl of talent, dysfunction, and untapped potential. 2003 Nuggets. This team couldn't score, couldn't win, and somehow still managed to build a future out of the rubble. They finished 17th and 65th, ranking dead last in points per game with just over 84. Juwan Howard did everything he could, averaging 18 points and 7 rebounds, but he was surrounded by a carousel of projects and placeholders. Nene Hilario was a bright spot, making the all-rookie first team and showing flashes with 10 points and 6 rebounds per game. The 5th overall pick, Nikolaos Tskitishvili, was the opposite. 3 points a game and plenty of confused stares. Junior Harrington played all 82 games, mostly because someone had to. Marcus Camby only made it to 29 games with his body holding on by duct tape. They lost 14 straight in the middle of the season and dropped the final 8. Their offense was a disaster, with the worst rating in the league, and they barely cracked 90 points allowed. Not because of elite defense, but because their pace dragged like a slow funeral. But somehow, through the trades and the wreckage, they set the stage for a rebuild. It just looked awful doing it. 2004 Jazz. Somehow, they lost 2 Hall of Famers and still finished over 500. After Stockton retired and Malone bolted to the Lakers, everyone figured Utah would nosedive. Instead, they went 42-40 and missed the playoffs by a single game. No All-Stars, no stars at all really. Just Andrei Kirilenko doing everything. 16 points, 8 boards, nearly 3 blocks. Carlos Arroyo stepped into Stockton's shoes with 12 points and 5 assists. And Matt Harpring chipped in 16. But nobody expected this team to even sniff 500. Jerry Sloan turned a bunch of role players into a functional unit. They weren't flashy, just gritty. The offense barely cracked 88 a game, but the defense held teams under 90. Gordon Giricek showed up mid-season and did enough not to wreck the chemistry. They beat the Lakers early on and stayed competitive all year, but a late season skid and a weak conference record sunk them. Still, with a negative net rating and a bottom 5 offense, they hung in there with teams full of talent. No tanking, no collapse, just stubborn competence in a year where they were expected to disappear. Strange, but kind of admirable. 2020 Knicks. The plan? Sign as many power forwards as legally allowed. Julius Randle, Bobby Portis, Taj Gibson, and Marcus Morris all ended up in the same front court, like it was a clearance sale on 6'8" dudes. After missing out on the big names in free agency, the Knicks filled the roster with overlapping skill sets and hoped for the best. Spoiler, it didn't work. They went 21-45. David Fizdale was fired after starting 4-18, and Mike Miller came in to clean up the mess, going 17-27. Randle led the team with almost 20 points and nearly 10 rebounds, but his playmaking and defense left plenty to be desired. Morris was their most efficient scorer and top 3-point shooter. Then they traded him. Portis and Gibson each chipped in a bit, but the offense ranked 29th in scoring and the defense wasn't much better. Their net rating was a brutal -6.5. It was a year defined by redundancy, missed expectations, and a bizarre roster strategy that left them clogged in the paint and empty on the scoreboard. At least the memes were consistent. If you enjoyed this, I'm going to be posting a lot here. I would greatly appreciate it if you could subscribe. Thanks for watching.